If you feel like your body has betrayed you, like pleasure is something reserved for other people, something you have to earn, or something you're always getting wrong, this little corner of podcast land is for you. I'm your radical, rageful mama bear, fiercely defending your right to feel good in your body and dragging you lovingly through the annotated bibliography of everything your sex ed forgot to mention. Because here's the truth. Pleasure isn't a side dish, it's not fluff, it's not luxury, it's your body's way of saying, I'm alive, I belong, and I have power. Welcome to the Nature of Pleasure. I'm Nicole Siegel, certified sexological body worker and creator of the Body Compass Method. And this is where we unravel the quiet codes of your body, the hidden intelligence beneath desire, and the organic rhythm of your erotic nature. Your sex life feels like it's running on a script. Desire, arousal, penetration, orgasm, curtain call. It's not because you are broken. It's because the model is. In this episode, we're dragging the tired-ass myth of linear sex into the light. We'll unpack how a bunch of corset-wearing colonizers, Freud's fragile ego, and some very clinical dudes with zip boards created a model of sex that left most of us behind. You'll learn why low desire isn't a diagnosis, it's a misunderstanding, how hysteria, vibrators, and Victorian repression are more connected than you think, why queer, neurodivergent, trauma-informed, slow, cyclical, relational pleasure was never included in the original data, and what it actually means to build a model based on your body, not their agenda. We're burning the performance script. We're reclaiming the spiral, and we're doing it with sass, history, science, and a whole lot of truth telling, just like always. So if you've ever felt like you weren't doing sex right, this episode will blow that myth wide open because your body was never the problem. The model just wasn't made for you. Oh, and before we dive in, if your body is already whispering more, please, I've got options. If you're just starting this journey or your nervous system needs a gentle, private invitation back to sensation, grab my free video series, The 3 Best At-Home Sexological Bodywork Practices for more embodied sex. These are slow, simple, body-loving rituals you can do from the comfort of your own bed. No pressure, no performance, just reconnection. And if you're listening with a partner in mind, or you've been dreaming about what it would feel like to be touched like someone actually studied for it, Reset Your Erotic Rhythm is my step-by-step couples course for reawakening desire, even if it's been on mute for months. You can find both in the show notes. Go get them. Your body is already asking. Okay, let's talk about how we ended up with this tired-ass idea of sex as a straight line. Desire, arousal, penetration, orgasm, curtain call. The belief that the sequence is how sex is supposed to be is so deeply ingrained in our culture that most people have never even stopped to question it. But this wasn't handed down by some divine being from a vulva-shaped cloud. This was manufactured, constructed, assembled from a very narrow and very male-focused lens. So to figure out how we got here, we need to roll back the tapes. And no, this isn't going to be some romantic candlelit stroll through history. This is a behind-the-scenes tour through the dusty patriarchal archives of Western medicine, psychology, and power. So our first stop is the Victorian era, aka the original pleasure police. Welcome to the 1800s, when people were choking on corsets and colonialism and sexuality was under strict moral lockdown. This was a time when women were expected to be pure, pious, and painfully self-sacrificing. The ideal woman was delicate, asexual, and emotionally repressed unless she was crying in a chaise lounge because her uterus was supposedly wandering around her body, which doctors genuinely believed was a thing. If you were a woman who ever expressed desire, you were a threat. If you were a man who didn't, you were suspect. And if you were queer, trans, kinky, or non-monogamous, you were erased or punished or pathologized. This is when the diagnosis of hysteria came into vogue. Hysteria was a catch-all diagnosis for any woman who was too emotional, too horny, too angry, or, God forbid, uninterested in her husband's advances. Symptoms included anxiety, insomnia, irritability, and, oh yes, wanting sex. The treatment? Pelvic massage performed by a doctor to induce hysterical paroxysm. In plain English, a medicalized orgasm performed on the woman for the doctor to calm her down. Consent, pleasure, or agency, not even part of the conversation. The vibrator was literally invented to make this process more efficient so doctors wouldn't get tired. Yes, really. So from the jump, Western medicine wasn't interested in exploring women's pleasure. It was interested in controlling it, in taming it, and turning it into a medical problem to be solved. Fast forward to the early 1900s, aka Freud and friends ruin everything. Let's talk about Freud for a second. Sigmund, tell me about your mother, Freud. Now, Freud did give us some good stuff about the unconscious mind, but when it came to sexuality, especially female sexuality, he really went off the rails. Freud believed there were two kinds of orgasms, clitoral and vaginal. Clitoral orgasms, he said, were immature. Real women, mature women, were supposed to grow out of them and graduate to vaginal orgasms, which are supposedly more evolved and fulfilling, despite not having a vagina. Freud believed that mature, healthy women should orgasm from vaginal penetration alone, no clitoral stimulation needed. If you needed external stimulation, you were considered infantile in your erotic development. Infantile, let that sink in. He thought that clitoral orgasms were for immature women, which is hilarious considering clits have over 8,000 nerve endings and zero function besides pleasure. Freud didn't even know where it was, by the way. So thanks to Freud, not only was pleasure misunderstood, it was pathologized if it didn't align with penis-centric logic. Translation: if your orgasm doesn't happen from penile penetration alone, you are developmentally stunted. And this idea still haunts us today. Despite the fact that the clitoris is the only human orgasm whose sole purpose is pleasure, and that most people with vulvas require clitoral stimulation to climax, Freud's hierarchy of orgasms still lingers in sexual scripts, porn plots, and hetero bedroom shame spirals. Freud also believed that women's sexuality was inherently passive, that they received desire rather than initiated it. He wasn't interested in curiosity or complexity or the emotional intelligence of actual arousal. Nope, he wanted a system that could be charted and ranked. Let's move to the mid-1900s with the rise of sexual science, but let's make it patriarchal. Now we get to the era where researchers tried to quantify and standardize sexuality. Enter Alfred Kinsey, Masters and Johnson, and a bunch of people in lab coats holding clipboards and watching people have sex under fluorescent lighting. Let's start with Kinsey. Kinsey was a biologist and sex researcher who, in the 1940s and 50s, published groundbreaking reports on male and female sexual behavior. His work shocked the public and revealed that people were already living more sexually diverse lives than mainstream culture allowed. But even Kinsey, for all his data collection, wasn't immune to bias. His team primarily studied white, middle-class, educated people, often excluding anyone who didn't fit that mold. Then we get Masters and Johnson, who in 1966 published Human Sexual Response. Their goal? To document and pleasure the phases of sexual arousal using observable physiological responses. And voila, the 4-phase sexual response cycle was born. Excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution, just like the narrative arc. Literally a bell curve, a sexual roller coaster that starts slow, builds tension, climaxes, and then coasts to a stop. Linear, measurable, and neat, just like a corporate workflow. But here's the problem. They studied people in lab environments that were deeply unnatural and often still prioritized male pleasure. Penetrative sex was the gold standard. Orgasms were the end goal. Emotions, not measured. Trauma, not accounted for. Cultural pressure, completely ignored. And if your body didn't follow this arc, if your turn-on came after touch, or if you needed emotional intimacy first, or if your orgasm didn't look like the ones they charted, they were labeled dysfunctional, low desire, non-orgasmic, sexually difficult. Not the good difficult, just the kind that doesn't fit the machine. Meanwhile, in pop culture, magazines like Cosmopolitan and Playboy were running sex advice based on these same outdated models. Women were told how to please their man and how to be sexy but not slutty, and how to get their body back into compliance with the male gaze. Porn exploded in the 70s and 80s with scripts that mimicked the exact same trajectory. Arousal is instant, sex is penetrative, climax is required. Anything else? Edit it out. Even sex ed in schools focused on reproduction, disease, and fear, not desire, not consent, not exploration, and definitely not pleasure. Meanwhile, over in medicine and media land, doctors were pushing a one-size-fits-all model of sexual health. Magazines like Cosmopolitan were serving up 237 ways to please your man, none of which included asking what you want or checking in with how you feel. Hollywood was writing sex like a Marvel movie. Big buildup, fast action, climactic explosion, roll credits. We were being trained to see sex like a performance, not a process. And it always ended the same way, with someone, usually a man, finishing and everyone else pretending it was fulfilling. So what does that mean for you? It means you inherited a model that was built by men, built for men, based on male bodies, focus on performance over connection, and deeply suspicious of emotions, cycle, and nuance. It means your experience of desire, especially if it's cyclical, emotional, delayed, layered, spiritual, or requires trust, was never even considered. You weren't broken. You were unaccounted for. And here's the kicker. If your body didn't match that arc, if you didn't get aroused first, or needed connection before horniness, or didn't climax with penetration, you were labeled disordered, having low desire, dysfunctional, frigid, and orgasmic. They had literal clinical categories for women who didn't orgasm during intercourse. Because obviously the problem couldn't be the model. It had to be you. And guess what? This logic didn't stop at sex. Let's zoom out for a second. Because linear obsession with bodies performing on cue, it shows up everywhere in the medical model, especially in birth. You've heard of the 1 centimeter per hour cervical dilation rule. That tiny little metric that's used to measure whether labor is progressing fast enough. If you don't dilate according to schedule, you're labeled as stalled, too slow, not progressing. Cue the interventions, Pitocin, epidurals, emergency C-section. But here's the thing. That whole 1 centimeter per hour thing, it's based on a study from the 1950s by a man named Emanuel Friedman. He charted the average labor curve based on a very narrow group of women, white, middle class, and, wait for it, medicated. Most of them were sedated, lying on their backs, hooked up to IVs. Their labors were already being managed and manipulated by the system. And yet that became the gold standard for how birth should organically unfold. So if your cervix, in its infinite wisdom, wants to dilate 2 centimeters, then hang out and vibe for a few hours before rocketing to 10 in a sudden burst of glory, that's not wrong. That's nature. That's you. But medicine doesn't like spirals. It likes graphs, linear graphs, just like the sexual response cycle. Just like the sexual response cycle, the medical birth model was built on the idea that bodies should be linear, predictable, and efficient. That if your body doesn't perform on someone else's timeline, it's faulty. It needs to be fixed, pushed, controlled. Sound familiar? Because it's the same damn logic. The same system that says if you don't get wet fast enough, something's wrong, is the one saying if your cervix doesn't dilate fast enough, something's wrong. In both cases, the underlying message is you're too slow, you're too complicated, too hard to manage. What's actually true is that your body is wise, cyclical, responsive, and operating on a timeline that makes sense for you. But when the system is built to treat you like a broken machine, not a miraculous organism, the solution is always more control, more pressure, and more shame. So yeah, this linear sex model, it's not just messing with your bedroom. It's part of a bigger story of how bodies, especially female and femme bodies, have been studied, measured, and manipulated by systems obsessed with control. Even modern sex education, if you got any at all, is still largely based on these outdated linear models. Your doctor probably trained in it. Your therapist, unless they specialize in sex therapy, probably echoing it. Your partner, absolutely influenced by it. And you might be unconsciously living it out every time you shame yourself for not being in the mood. If you've been giving your partner books, podcasts, loving hints, carrier pigeons, and they still don't speak your body's language, yeah, I made something for that. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm is my couples course for bringing intimacy back into rhythm without cringe scripts, weird sex games, or resentment under the surface. It's loving, it's structured, and it works even if your sex life has been on mute since 2020. Check it out in the show notes. Let me do the teaching so you can get back to the touching. Let's go to the modern day and the legacy of this linear model. Today, most of us are still internalizing this history without even realizing it. We judge our desire if it doesn't show up on time. We perform sex instead of feeling it. We worry that something's wrong with us if we don't crave penetration or climax the same way every time. But here's the thing, you are not broken. The model is. This entire framework was built without your body, your culture, your emotions, or your pleasure in mind. It was engineered for efficiency, observation, and control, not connection, curiosity, or complexity. If your desire feels messy, cyclical, relational, or mood dependent, if your pleasure blooms slowly or arrives midway or skips the orgasm altogether, that's not dysfunction. That's real. That's valid. That's you. And you deserve a model that actually knows how to hold that. Who got left out of this model? Short answer, pretty much everyone but the lab-coated penis havers. So now that we've unpacked the dusty, stiff, hetero history of linear sex, let's talk about what really matters. What happened to all the people who didn't fit? Because it's one thing to say, oh, the model's outdated. It's another thing to realize that entire populations were never even considered human enough to include. People were studied, pathologized, and then gaslit into believing their bodies were broken. But this wasn't just a case of, oops, we missed a few perspectives. This was full-blown erasure. Entire ways of experiencing desire, arousal, and intimacy were excluded because they didn't match the straight, white, male, performance-based sex fantasy some guy in a lab decided was normal. So let's name it. Let's shine a light on all the brilliant, complex, beautiful humans who were left out of the old battle, but who are still being told they're too much, too slow, too complicated, or not sexual enough. Because this next part, this is for you. People with vulvas. Let's just start there. If you have a vulva, your pleasure was quite literally not the subject of early sex research. When researchers built their models, they studied what they could see, aka erections, ejaculation, and other, quote, observable phenomena. The clitoris, barely mentioned, misunderstood. Some early anatomists thought it was a mini penis. Others ignored it altogether. And yes, we didn't fully map the internal structure of the clitoris until the 1990s. Sit with that. The truth is, most people with vulvas experience what we call nowadays responsive desire, not spontaneous desire. In my work, I often see that all bodies and all genitals generally experience responsive desire, not spontaneous desire, because our bodies live within an ecosystem and a system, the environment that we're in, our emotional system, our relational system. And that means desire often shows up after arousal starts, after attunement happens, after closeness, after the touch, after vibe. Under the linear model, that's not how it's supposed to work. If you're not in the mood before sex starts, the model says you're not sexual enough. You must have a low libido or trauma or hormone imbalance, or you're not attracted to your partner, or you need to try harder. So people with vulvas spend decades trying to fix themselves when really the model just never made space for how bodies actually work. Okay, who else was left out in this linear model? Queer people. Linear sex assumes a penis and a vagina walk into a room and have one kind of sex that ends in one kind of orgasm. But what happens when there is no penis, no vagina, or they don't match the standard pairings? The model breaks, or more accurately, the model erases. Queer sex is nonlinear by nature. It doesn't follow a predictable arc. It's creative, contextual, co-authored, built on communication, experimentation, and mutual discovery. And that terrifies a system designed to control our bodies. So instead of being studied, celebrated, or taught, queer sex was pathologized, erased from textbooks, labeled deviant, criminalized, and even shoved into narrow stereotypes or sensationalist porn tropes. Even today, queer folks are often left out of conversations about desire, arousal, and anatomy, unless they go looking for specialized resources, and that's if they're lucky. Neurodivergent folks were also not included in this literary model. Sensory processing, timing, emotional regulation, attunement, and the beautiful chaos of non-normative brain, all things that were ignored by the linear model. If you're autistic, ADHD, or otherwise neurodivergent, you might experience arousal differently. You might need different kinds of stimulation, pacing, or communication. You might find the pressure to get there totally shuts out your desire altogether. But the linear model doesn't care. It says start here and there, preferably within 20 minutes or less. Anything outside that gets labeled as too much, too sensitive, too complicated. But what if your way is actually a gift? What if your neurodivergence isn't a barrier to pleasure, but a map to deeper, more honest, more attuned intimacy? The linear model will never ask, but I will. Trauma survivors are another big one that are not included in the linear model. This one makes me want to throw the whole model in the trash fire and dance on the ashes. The linear model assumes the body is a machine, and frankly, how dare it? You press desire and orgasm comes out the other end. But if you have trauma, especially sexual or intimate trauma, that line gets jagged. Desire may come with fear. Arousal might trigger memories. Touch might feel overwhelming, even if you want it. Consent might be there, but your nervous system hasn't caught up. Trauma rewires the body, and healing requires slowness, spaciousness, and safety. Not get turned on fast and don't make it weird. The linear model has no capacity to hold that. It shames you for not wanting it fast enough. It medicalizes your freeze response. It labels your beautiful, adapted nervous system as broken. But what if you're not behind? What if you're just healing in the way your body needs to heal? What if your pleasure is still possible, but it's going to take a new map? And you know who else this model doesn't include? Men. It doesn't even include men. It screws them over too. It tells them that desire is always spontaneous. Their value is measured by their erections. That sex is a performance and their job is to deliver. So if they experience stress-related erectile issues or performance anxiety or emotional numbness, the model says, you are not a real man. It doesn't give them language for slowness, softness, connection, or pleasure beyond penetration. The model takes men's humanity and shrinks it down to a dysfunction. That's not intimacy, that's machinery. And lastly, the model does not include anyone who doesn't like being on a timer. Let's be real. The linear model isn't just exclusionary. It's boring. It reduces sex to a checklist, a race, a predictable pattern, and it leaves no room for spontaneity, messiness, nuance, or evolution. Where's the slow build? Where's the stopping and starting? Where's the let's just lie naked together for an hour and see what happens? Where's the play? The answer is not in the model, but it's absolutely in your body, your relationship, and your lived experience. So the TLDR, linear sex left behind. Anyone who has a clitoris, experiences desire relationally, has trauma, is queer, is neurodivergent, is emotionally complex, does an orgasm on command, likes variety, has ever felt pressure to perform pleasure, or simply needs a little more goddamn foreplay. So basically, everyone. Trying to revive the vibe in your relationship? Don't start with lingerie. Start with reset your erotic rhythm. Okay, so you've just learned that the model most of us inherited about sex and desire is deeply flawed, unscientific, exclusionary, and honestly, a buzzkill. So what now? What do we do with all of this knowledge? Do we just sit here, bitter and betrayed, clutching our vibrators and whispering, it was never about the orgasm? No, we build a new map. And that's exactly what the body compass method is. This isn't just about throwing out the old model. It's about returning to you, your rhythms, your body's truth, your pleasures, natural intelligence, because your body isn't broken, it's brilliant. It just needs a model that was actually designed to listen to it. And after all this, you might be wondering, okay, if the linear model is trash, then what the hell do I do instead? Because it's one thing to tear down the system. It's another thing to walk into the wilderness of your body without a map. The body compass method isn't some trendy new hack or rebranded sex tip disguised as empowerment. It's a fundamental reorientation away from performance and back towards presence, away from scripted sexuality and toward the deep living language of your body. Because when I say your body already knows how to do this, I really mean it. Your body was never linear. It was never designed to sprint towards orgasm like it's clocking in for a shift. Your body is responsive, cyclical, contextual, brilliant. It's not a problem to be fixed. It's a compass to be followed. But when you've been told over and over that your pleasure should look like a straight line, when you've been made to feel like you're behind, broken, or too complicated, you start to doubt your own signals. You stop trusting the very wisdom that was built into you from the beginning. The body compass method is here to change that. It's a framework, yes, but more than that, it's a return to the truth of how desire actually works for most people, to the organic, non-linear rhythms of turn on, safety, sensation, and joy, to this sacred circuitry of your erotic aliveness. This method is what happens when we stop asking, how do I fix my body to match the model? And start asking, what if my body has been the model all along? The body compass method says you're not linear, you're not a problem to solve, you're not too much or not enough. You're just not a machine. You're a body with tides, with timing, with a language of sensation that goes beyond performance and productivity. In this method, we stop asking, how do I get turned on faster? And we start asking, what is my body asking me to feel right now? We stop pushing for orgasm like it's a deadline. We start listening for the quiet yes of safety, the slow build of trust, the deep throb of a real turn on. This method was designed with all the left outs in mind. If you've ever been told your desire is low, if you've been blamed for not wanting sex the same way your partner does, if you're healing trauma and feel like your body's response doesn't make sense, if you're neurodivergent and traditional sex advice makes you want to scream, if you're queer, trans, non-binary, or simply uninterested in playing by the norm, this method is for you. It's not a 5-step formula to fix you. It's not a checklist for becoming a better sexual partner. It's a framework for coming home to yourself. So how does it work? We follow the body's natural language, which, spoiler, not made up of words like should, hurry, or just relax. We use tools like somatic awareness, because your body's always telling you something, even when your brain is buffering. Pleasure mapping, not the here's your G-spot kind, the what makes your whole self feel alive kind. Seasonal, cyclical frameworks, because your body has seasons, not just on a fertility chart, but in your moods, your energy, your access to turn on. We use consent and communication that starts internally, no more betraying yourself to preserve the vibe. And we use pleasure practices that build capacity over time. Not pressure to perform, but space to explore. You learn to track what opens you, what closes you, what pulls you deeper into presence, and what kicks you back into dissociation. And then you learn to trust that wisdom, to build a relationship with your body where you are no longer the project, but the compass. Instead of a staircase, think spiral. In the linear model, you climb the stairs, start at desire, march through arousal, end at orgasm. In this method, you're walking a spiral. You circle back, you deepen, you spiral inward, you expand outward. Some days you're in the realm of safety. Some days you're focusing on your genitals. Some days you're focusing on your growth. There's no wrong place to be, no deadline to hit. There's just your unfolding, your curiosity, your aliveness. Because the truth is that pleasure is not a reward for performing sex correctly. Pleasure is a birthright. Your body is not a machine. It's an ecosystem, a landscape, a living archive of wisdom. And your pleasure, true, unforced, deeply rooted pleasure, is not linear. It's wild, relational, and sacred. So if you're ready to stop trying to fit the model and start letting your body lead the way, then welcome to the Body Compass Method. This is where we remember that healing can feel good, that intimacy can feel safe, that desire can feel like home. And before you go, here is a practice to break the script called What Happens When You Don't Chase Pleasure. So let's try something radical. Let's do nothing, not forever, just for now. Let's pause the performance, drop the goal, set down the chase, because you've been taught the pressure is something you achieve, the desire is something you summon, and that sex is something you perform. But what if pleasure was never a pursuit? What if it was a listening? Try this. Find a quiet space, no music, no vibe, just you and your body. Lie down, sit, or lean against a wall. Close your eyes or keep them soft and unfocused. And ask yourself gently, like you're speaking to something sacred, what happens in my body when I stop trying to feel good? Not what do I want, not what should I feel, just what's left when I stop reaching for sensation. Let the silence stretch a little longer than you normally would. Let the boredom come if it comes, the impatience rise, let the numbness speak. Don't rush it. Your body has been waiting a long time for you to stop performing and just be with it. And then if anything arises, a flicker of sensation, a thought, a temperature shift, a memory, a subtle ache, a tingle, a tear, breath, instead of running toward it or away from it, ask, what if this was enough? This practice is not about feeling good. It's about feeling real. It's a practice of breaking the habit of chasing, fixing, improving. It's where the body compass method begins, not with a goal, but with a reckoning. Because pleasure can't be forced, but it will rise organically, naturally, when the conditions are right. And one of those conditions is not needing to be anything but what is. So this week, instead of chasing the orgasm, the vibe, the peak moment, try chasing nothing. Instead, feel everything, even the quiet, even the ache, even the stillness, especially the stillness. This is what it means to come home to your compass, not just to feel good, but to feel true. If this practice moves something in you, you're ready to stop outsourcing your sexuality to a broken script and start building an erotic life that actually fits your body. You're already on the path. Your body is the method. I'm just helping you remember. Pleasure isn't extra, it's everything. If something lit you up today, don't ignore it, follow it. The show notes are where the next steps live: free practices, deeper dives, the good kind of homework. Until next time, stay soft, stay sharp, and stay in your body. If you've ever wished someone would just hand you a pleasure map and say, start here, I have got you. My free video series, The 3 Best At-Home Sexological Bodywork Practices for More Embodied Sex, is like a sexy little user manual for your nervous system. They're gentle, juicy, and designed to be done in your bed on your time with no mirrors, no pressure, and no one watching, unless you want them to. Grab it in the show notes. Your body is already curious.